You're in the Huddle. G-Mac, Greg McKinney, J.C. Sherbert, and Lonzo on ESPN Upstate.
It's 2:22 in the Huddle. Sad news to report from the world of wrestling. WWE legend Jimmy Snuka has passed away at the age of 73. He was popular in the 1970s, managed by the legendary Captain Lou Albino. Sad news to report there. Also today, we have NBA basketball going on MLK Day. And the New York Knicks lead the Atlanta Hawks at halftime, 54-53. And in the first, the Washington Wizards lead the Portland Trail Blazers.
I'm just excited, even though it's bad news, that you're reporting some wrestling news. I think that's
absolutely.
Cool.
Why not? Everybody, we all watched wrestling growing up. If you're from the upstate, it's on Channel 21.
It's not just here. They watch wrestling all over the place.
I know, but I gotta be concerned.
It's a shame it has to be for that reason, though.
1-844-477-3776 is the number to get in on the phone. Text 71307. Be sure to use that keyword ESPN when you're sending us your text, so we'll know that it's for us. But before we get back out to your phone calls and read your text, we're going to get to our guest line and welcome in our good friend, Josh Pate from Football Nightly down south. Josh, how are you living today, my man?
I'm good. I heard that news about Snuka, and for anyone who grew up following wrestling, you know about how great he was in the ring. You know how big a showman he was, how revolutionary he was. If you can wrestle barefoot, then you're okay in my book. But then you also know about some of we say it off to the field in football, out of the ring stuff. And that whole controversy surrounding his girlfriend dying back in the 80s very mysteriously. So it's kind of, every time I hear people speak glowingly of Jimmy Snuka, I say, yep, but there was that thing. And it's always kind of weird.
So he's kind of the Ted Kennedy of professional wrestling.
He was recently acquitted, though, wasn't he? If I recall, I think so. I think they said he didn't do it. I don't know. I
don't know.
It's just murky.
It's a murky situation. Appreciate you bringing that to us. Josh, you were down at Tampa last week. We talked to you on game day. Clemson wins the game. 2 minutes to go. You're standing there. Clemson gets the ball. What's going through your mind?
The same thing that was going through Deshaun Watson's mind, apparently, as he talked in post-game. He said they left me too much time. And normally when you watch Alabama, they're not in that situation. So you have to really, to provide the proper context, think back to the first quarter of the game. The first quarter of the game, Alabama gets a 2-score lead. They're really controlling the clock. They're controlling the game on the ground, the way that you wonder why they didn't do it like that more during the season. And I remember late first quarter, early second quarter, a guy standing next to me, and I said, man, this is going to play out much different than last year's game, just due to sheer number of plays that Alabama's defense won't have had to be on the field for at this rate. And then you fast forward to the fourth quarter, and sure enough, Clemson has flipped the game entirely. They have taken control. They've found their offensive rhythm. Alabama's offense, due in large part to Clemson's adjustments, by the way, has gone into somewhat of a stall and a funk. And there Alabama sits, 2 minutes to go. Clemson has the ball. They've been on the field already defensively over 90 plays. They're completely gassed. And if you were to put odds on whether Deshaun Watson was about to lead a come-from-behind win for the Tigers, I would have said far more yes than no. It's about to happen.
Absolutely. And you could tell Alabama's defense was gassed. But that's the reason you run an offense like Clemson's. You got to – when you play teams like that, it's about number of plays. I thought, Clemson managed to get the tempo up. I thought a huge play in the game, too, Josh, was beginning of the second half. Bama gets a fumble. Ryan Anderson's going down the field toward the end zone. Looks like another defensive score is about to happen, and Hunter Renfrow catches up to him and stops him, and then Bama's held to a field goal. So that lead, which could have been 21-7, all of a sudden is 17-7. Clemson comes right back and scores, and then it's a field goal ball game, in spite of the fact that Bama had been outplaying Clemson until that point.
Well, they've done it 2 years in a row. When you talk about answering, that's one thing that I think makes Clemson unique. It's why they're carrying around a championship trophy today. It's why they came very close to having one last year. It's because even though they lost last year, whenever Alabama dealt what would normally be a knockout blow, and they dealt a couple of them. I mean, the Kenyon Drake touchdown, the 2 O.J. Howard long touchdown passes last year, every time, Clemson never batted an eye. They just answered right back. And then in this year's game, sure enough, it almost looked like a replay. They hit another big play to Howard, and boom, touchdown drive. Very next drive from Clemson, the play that you're talking about. They keep Bama out of the end zone, but then more importantly, boom, they just answer. They answered right back. They never flinched. They acted like a team that's been there before, a team confident and resolved to what they are, who they are, what they're going to do. And that's unique. There are a lot of talented teams out there, but teams that are made that way from the neck up, I always say that's very rare.
Yeah, that's kind of a championship recipe, in my opinion. In football, a lot of times it's about resiliency and how you do respond. And, that's a credit to Dabo Swinney and his staff, because Clemson responded every single time this year. I know they lost to Pitt, but, if you live dangerously, you're going to drop one every now and then. But, the Florida State game, the Louisville game comes to mind. Even Auburn, when they kept stopping them inside the 10, continued to stop them. I thought that this team responded all year. Some news from over your way, and I know down in Columbus you guys cover Bama, Auburn, Georgia. Greg Byrne from Arizona is the next athletics director at the University of Alabama. And Dennis Dodd today was talking that he may make the most important football hire in a generation, i.e., whenever Nick Saban hangs it up. But wanted to get your take on the hire and kind of how you see his tenure playing out. He's young. He's 45 years old, so could be a guy that's at Alabama for a long time.
Well, the people at Alabama look at themselves and think to themselves, why aren't we Florida? And I'm not talking about on the football field. I'm talking about athletic department as a whole. What is the reason why we can't be competitive across the board? We're great in football, but what's stopping us from being good in baseball? They made a good hire in basketball, but that's only very recently. It's almost like they kind of chalk the other sports up as, yeah, we'll still play them, but hey, football rules the day. Well, football can rule the day, and you can still be good in other sports. And I think that's one thing reflected in this hire. That's what will get people at Alabama excited. As for the hire after football, I think Dodd's dead on the money about that. And there have always been whispers around Alabama. People don't like to acknowledge that this is coming, but eventually Nick Saban's last day at Alabama will come. Maybe 2 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, but it will come eventually. And there's that story from his days back at LSU that, he recommended Houston Nutt take over for him when he left. And so people, while they've always thought very highly of Nick Saban as a head football coach, his ability to maybe identify his replacements, not something that people at Alabama have been all that excited about. And so now you bring in an athletic director, and I think that kind of eases the concern that maybe the next Houston Nutt was going to be recommended at Alabama. And moving forward, not only do you have maybe some peace of mind as to how the transition football-wise will go, but you also have some excitement, I think, if you're an Alabama fan, that, hey, maybe it won't just be football season and then, when does spring football start? Maybe you start to get competitive across the board. And as I said, when you look at the resources they have, there's no reason they can't be.
Talking to Josh Pate from Football Nightly down south. Josh, it's the middle of college football recruiting now. I guess the silly season is what I call it, because you got coaching changes and then you've got recruiting that takes place. I look at Georgia and their class right now, 23 people in the class, 23 souls, I guess, if you want to use an airline registry or boat cruise registry term.
Yeah.
17 of those are from the state of Georgia. And I think that the key to Kirby Smart or any coach at UGA is for them to sign their share of the top each year. And their share is probably more than just, half of the top 20 or 25 or whatever. Their share as the University of Georgia should be, 66 to 70% of the elite players from the state. And it looks like with, the way their class is going, the third ranked class in the country, they're on their way to doing that. But, what's kind of the take from Georgia's end as to how recruiting's been going after, what was a decent 8-5 season, but certainly not anything to write home about?
Yeah, we take a lot of calls on this down here. What I said a year ago, rather, on signing day, I was doing some radio down here, of course, doing our own show as well. And I said, forget about this signing day. I mean, this is a throwaway signing day. Anything they get is gravy. A year from now, which is this upcoming signing day, I said I'd be very shocked if he didn't have them. Kirby Smart didn't have them in contention for the top class in the country. Because I knew where the premium was going to be placed. I knew that locking down the state or getting as close to it as they could was going to be a priority. And like you said, you don't have to lock down the state. That's impossible. But if they come anywhere close to doing so, then that alone is going to place you at or near the top of the rankings. And I look at just recently, guys like D'Angelo Gibbs, guys like Robert Beal is a big one. The Notori Johnson kid used to be committed to Alabama. Nate McBride. All these names I'm mentioning are big-time in-state prospects that I've got a feeling, JC, there's no way to know this for sure, but those feel like the kind of kids that would have, in all likelihood, left the state in cycles prior. And he's kept them home. They've got a big fish still out there in Aubrey Solomon. Whether they keep him home or not, they have hit a grand slam in terms of in-state recruiting, especially because, like you said, they're not coming off a 10-2 campaign. They're coming off 8-4, 8-5, whatever the final record was. Still a lot of criticism, still a lot of unknown about the coaching staff amongst media and fans. But they don't matter because they don't play. If you can get recruits to buy into your vision, which apparently they've done, that's how you build a roster, and players are the way you win football games.
Absolutely. Aubrey Solomon, of course, 5-star defensive tackle from Lee County. You know, Michigan is the team that's kind of putting the screws to Georgia there, so that's very interesting. And Alabama also is up top there, so that's a big one. And then, of course, we've talked about Jemias Williams, who's committed to South Carolina from Grayson, that the Dogs are trying to flip. You know, Auburn, Rhett Lashley leaves Auburn last week, and looks like they're going to hire a new OC, and looks like it won't be Art Briles, which is, you know, I thought if there was a school in the country that would do it, it would be Auburn. But you know, what's your take on where that goes? Because I guess the public talk is that this person's going to run the offense and call the plays. And, you know, I've been told a lot that Gus really likes calling the plays. And you know, I don't know. It's just interesting. And it's a critical year coming up for Auburn. You know, 8-5 this year. They went to the Sugar Bowl. Were really good in the middle of the season. You know, who knows what's going to happen. I mean, Jarrett Stidham's going to come in with a ton of hype and expectation. But, you know, what's going to happen on offense? You know, are they still going to be what Gus likes for them to be? What's going to happen? That's my question.
Well, I don't care what's said externally. Internally, and I'm speaking about myself here as well, just my own personal opinion, I do not think, and people close to that program, at least that I've spoken to, do not believe that the goal for Gus Malzahn is to bring in anyone to run the offense. They are being brought in to implement his offense, take marching orders. I would have found it very difficult to envision someone like Art Briles without the baggage coming in to fill that role. That's not the role a former Big 12 head coach would look to fill. The feeling around here is that Auburn and Gus Malzahn are going to sink or swim doing it his way. And that's the way a lot of guys are. That's not unique to Gus Malzahn. But the biggest questions with him, talking to some high school coaches around here, speaking to people closer to their program, you know, he came in 2013, JC, and he lit the world on fire right off the bat. And the biggest misconception when he went to the national championship game in year one as a head coach here, the biggest misconception is that they vastly overachieved in terms of the roster they had. Because everyone looked at the roster, and that team had gone 3-9 the year before, and people assumed, well, he's inheriting a 3-9 team. That means he's inheriting 3-9 talent. Now, you're in the recruiting world, so you know good and well that roster was not 3-9 talent-wise. No. It may have been woefully underdeveloped. They may have woefully underachieved, but he inherited a ton of future NFL players on both sides of the ball, and I'm talking about high draft pick types. And so the feeling around here has always been he basically slapped the SEC in the back of the head in year one. And when I say that, I mean he brought something radically different here. It took a lot of people by surprise. A lot of people were not prepared, defensive personnel-wise, to defend what he did. He had a lot more talent in year one than anyone gave him credit for. And the misconception was that, hey, if we're Auburn and this is what we did in year one, imagine what it's going to be like when he gets his players in here, when the program fully reflects him. And I took a lot of heat the day after they lost to Florida State for going on radio and saying, you know, I think there's just as good, if not better, a chance that this is as close as he ever gets to winning a national championship. And sure enough, they haven't been back since because the program now does reflect him. And who Gus Malzahn is someone with no head coaching experience, virtually no head coaching experience outside of Auburn. One of the big questions from high school coaches around here has been his inability to finish on the recruiting trail. Another one of the big questions that you hear a lot of people off the record ask is, how good is he at adapting? Because the league has adapted, JC. I mean, the SEC has adapted to what he does. So then it's kind of like a rookie that comes up and hits 350 his first 2 months in the big leagues. Well, pitchers are going to adjust. The SEC adjusted to Gus Malzahn. How does he readjust now? That's the question he's had trouble answering.
Yeah, that's a big question moving forward, I think. And if not, you know, I think there are a lot of people out there that would love to talk about that job, Chip Kelly included. So, you know, I think, you know, he kind of saved himself this year, but, you know, we'll see what happens moving forward. I do think getting Stidham in there gives them more of a chance. I've never really been a Sean White fan, although Sean White played better than any other quarterback they had this year. There's no question about it. And he gave them more of a chance than I thought. But, I think you need an outstanding quarterback for that stuff to work. And, you know, Josh, it may just be that, you know, that type of system defenses have caught up to, and, you know, that it's going to be whatever's new out there. I mean, you know, that happens in the SEC sometimes. I mean, you know, we had the Wildcat with Houston Nutt and Malzahn that year that was tough for everybody to stop. You know, at Kentucky, Hal Mummy had a little run where he was putting points up, and then we saw Tony Franklin try to run at that at Auburn one year, and it was just it was terrible, you know. And I don't know. I just I look at it, and you know, my concern would be that maybe it's passed him by, but we'll see next year. All right, man. Well, we appreciate you talking to us today, Josh, for coming in the huddle and all that. And he is Josh Pate. You can follow him on Twitter at @project_Pate. He's hilarious, great takes, and a really, really talented guy that knows his stuff. So be sure to give him a follow. Thanks, Josh.
All right. Have a good one, JC.
No problem.